And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Banner Monday, where we begin each week the best way that we know how, by talking about how there is no basketball, unfortunately. A couple quick housekeeping notes off the top here before we bring in our guest today, as always, Mike DeCourcy. Assembly Call Radio is coming up this Thursday. I know the season was over abruptly, but we'll keep doing Assembly Call Radio throughout the offseason. This week, we're going to take a composite bracket from Andy, Delphi Bracketology, Galen Clavio, and Mike DeCourcy, the four official bracketologists of the Assembly Call, and we will talk through it as if it is a real bracket. Try to get that bracket / NCAA tournament fix. And then, just real quick, make sure that you support our friends at Home Field Apparel. They are doing everything right to do right by their employees and trying to follow all the guidelines. And I think it's so important at this time to support small businesses like that. So homefieldapparel.com, support those guys. And also it's really important to support your local food banks. With kids out of school, a lot of kids rely on the meals that they get at school to eat. And when they can't go to school, when things, crazy things happen, like obviously what we're going through right now, food banks a lot of times pick up the slack. And so you can go to foodpantries.org and feedingamerica.org to find your local food pantry and figure out how to donate or provide your support to them. Okay, and now I'm pleased to welcome in, as we do every Monday, from the Big Ten Network, the Sporting News, and Fox, one of the hardest working men in college basketball, the venerable Mike DeCourcy. And Mike, I don't even really know how to start today. How are you handling a March that is certainly not devoid of madness, but that is conspicuously devoid of basketball?
I will tell you that on Saturday, I think it was, that it dawned on me. On the final Saturday of the regular season, the day that Wisconsin beat IU to win their share of the Big 12 title, the day before was Maryland and Michigan State clinched theirs. On that Saturday night, I was scheduled to appear on Fox to talk brackets between the Xavier Butler and Oregon Stanford games on I believe it was on FS1 at the time. And so they set up a studio for me in Chicago, a private studio, rentable studio. And I went in there and I sat in the chair for about 45, 50 minutes. And the Xavier game ran super long and it didn't end until almost, I think it was past the 10:50 or whatever the local time was. Maybe it was 9:50. I can't remember, but the 50, it was supposed to end at the bottom of the hour and went all the way up past the 50 mark. And so I wound up sitting there without and the game basically usurped my time. And so they went straight from site to site. I don't think they might've come back to the studio briefly to set up the next game, the Stanford game. And that night, so I didn't get on. And then this subsequent Saturday, so in that game, Kamar Baldwin hit game-winning three to beat Xavier and put them in a perilous position for the tournament. And then I was sitting there at home on Saturday, which of course I would certainly not have been under ordinary circumstances. And it felt like that Kamar Baldwin shot had happened in 1975. I mean, that week, just it was so distant. That shot was 7 days earlier, and I swear to you, it felt like it could have been 7 years earlier. It was such a weird week.
Yeah.
And so much happened. I was in studio on Wednesday night during the IU game against Nebraska and the Minnesota game, obviously against Northwestern. And then I flew down back to Indy, got in my car, drove over to Banker's Life, walked in, set my stuff up in the press room, expecting they would play with no spectators, got an email or Slack message from my bosses saying, hey, could you shoot some with your iPhone, take some shots of the no crowd before, and I said, okay. And so then I walked out probably about 20 minutes to noon. And the Rutgers players were walking back in at the time. And I didn't think anything of it because that's how it works. They warm up, they come back, locker room, get last instructions, and then they, take the court, do a few layups, national anthem, we ball. And the weird thing was, as they were coming off, though, when at the time I wasn't thinking about it, but they didn't look super fired up, and Jacob Young threw his forearm into a sign or something that was standing there as he walked by, and it didn't look like he was trying to get fired up. And then you got out to the floor, and it still took another 3-4 minutes before I realized that we weren't playing any hoops. Finally, I heard somebody over my shoulder say something about canceled. I'm like, what? And because I hadn't been checking my email at that point, I was getting ready to get set up. And that's when we learned that there would be no games. I was still checking for my press seat on the chart and found out there would be no games. And nothing has been the same since that moment. Now, obviously, everything has been like an avalanche downhill. And, I know that Rudy Gobert is getting some criticism on some fronts for showing up sick to work, so to speak. But I don't know that we would have gotten to this point in where it is and how serious it is and how seriously it needs to be taken if it hadn't been for that. That's my opinion. It just seems like that just shifted the whole tide. People talk about Tom Hanks and he's in Australia, 7,000 miles away. I mean, there are lots of people in China who had it as well, unfortunately, and they're 7,000 miles away. So Rudy Gobert being in an arena, that brought it home, and them having to shut down the NBA or deciding to shut down the NBA season, that brought it home. So I think that in a lot of ways that probably was, a moment we needed to have.
That, especially in hindsight, that definitely seems like the domino that fell and then all the others fell after it. Of course, with the way that things have progressed, even if that hadn't happened, all these decisions probably would have been made a few days later, don't you think? Just with
I think probably,
where
but
everything's gone.
I think that we still might have played hoops in front of empty gyms on Thursday, Friday. I think it's possible that that's where we would have gone because they'd already said they were going to do the tournament with no fans.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like that was problematic, but when the NBA shut it down, you kind of knew that the NHL would follow suit and that the NCAA probably didn't have a choice but to stop. I wondered if they could have postponed. I still don't. I mean, we're seeing a lot of very pessimistic timelines, and I think that's probably a reasonable approach because under promise and over deliver. I mean, and we hope that that's the way the whole world works. We plan for the worst, and then hopefully it turns out better than that. That we can go back to our lives sooner than June or whenever. I mean, I've heard the NBA buzz about the NBA not playing until June or baseball not playing in June. That's what's going to be. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to be. I mean, you can make forecasts, and like I said, they may be unduly pessimistic. There isn't anybody out there that's going to give an optimistic forecast. There's no way they're going to do that. They're not going to be the ones that are on the record as saying, well, we think this will be over in 2 weeks. No one's going to do that. So maybe we get back to it sooner than is being said. I wish the NCAA had postponed at the time, just so we could maybe have some hope that we could get back to it, with the understanding that that may even only been a 10% chance that we would. I still would have thought that would have been preferable. And either way, I've been pretty consistent on this. Either way, whatever their thoughts were, I didn't think a one paragraph release covered it. I thought, I don't know if you saw the Kevin Warren press conference on BTN. We carried it on air, but I was there, and he sat there for 13 minutes and 43 seconds, I think it was. He sat there for that entire time, answered every question that any reporter had that was in the room. It didn't turn down any questions. And then when everybody was done, he walked away and we got all our questions. And I thought Mark Emmert, I didn't expect him to stand up in front of a press conference, but the NCAA can do a teleconference like that. They do them with the selection chairs 4 times, 5 times, whatever it is. Would have been easy to do. And he should have been willing, and he should have been eager to do that for the amount of money he's paid, which is a lot. He should have been eager to do that.
Well, Mike, some people know how to lead during tough times and others don't. That's something that we are definitely learning through this crisis. Boy, this seems like a controversy that was 5 years ago, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts, and forgive me if you addressed this elsewhere, but going back to that Indiana-Nebraska game, Did you have an issue with how Nebraska handled Fred Hoiberg coaching in that game, given everything that had gone on? And I know it said that he was cleared by a doctor to coach,
Yeah.
but obviously that was a big storyline coming out of that game.
I don't know, because I don't know what Nebraska saw. You know what I mean? We saw what we saw once he got on the bench, but I don't know what they saw. I mean, so I'm not sure why he felt as compelled to coach as he did, given the circumstance of the team, and he clearly wasn't feeling well. I know you don't want to abandon your team, but you're 7-25. I mean, it's okay. We get it. Jim Calhoun missed a lot of games because he was ill, and no one is happy. The coach hates it when that happens, but it's okay. It's okay. Like, if you're sick, it's okay. I mean, it doesn't happen to me a lot. I've been fortunate to not get ill a lot and miss work.
Knock on wood.
That's just good fortune. I mean, it's not, anything other than that. But when I got chickenpox in the 1995-96 season, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
When I was covering Memphis, I got chickenpox. And actually, it might have been, I think it was the 96 season. Yeah, because Larry Finch, I was in Larry Finch's office on a Friday night, the night before they played Tennessee. I wasn't in his office, attorney's office, his agent's office. And they were working out the final details of a contract extension. So I break that story, and I go home, and I've got this itchy back, and I say to my wife, "Is there something wrong with my back?" It's covered with chickenpox, and so they had to check with all the players, all the Tigers players, because I'd been at their practice and interviewed dudes, and they had to check with all of them and see if they were, if any of them all of them had it. And only one player hadn't had it. Yeah. And fortunately, he never developed it. So I was not chickenpox Michael. So fortunately, I didn't make anybody miss any games, and the cycle ended with me. But but I surely didn't show up for work that night. That's the only night of work I ever missed in almost 40-year career. But that's it's just being lucky, If I was sick, I wouldn't go.
I just love how you mark time in your life based on the athletic event that was most prominent going on.
Absolutely.
Right there. Hey, are you on board with Indiana fans who are claiming a Big Ten tournament title since Indiana won the last game of the tournament? That's how it works, right? I mean, we don't have much other success, so we're,
Cling to what you can. You got this silliness in Florida where their state legislature, I think, declared Florida State national champ.
I saw that.
Look, it was cute with UCF because they were undefeated, but the only thing that the Florida State can claim is an ACC championship. Yeah, and a lot of people were weirded out by the Florida State trophy ceremony when they canceled the ACC tournament. And I don't think people understand, like, they have this whole weird thing in the ACC where there's no such thing as a regular season champion. Did you they don't?
Yeah. Titus and Tate talk about that on their show a lot.
Yeah, you can claim it if you earn it. And if you go to Carolina, if you go to the Dean Dome, they have a whole big banner with all the years they won it. So it does exist, but they don't honor it. You don't get a trophy or anything. So when they canceled the tournament, they had to make somebody the champion. And so they gave it to FSU.
I think that's the dumbest thing. Let's recognize the team that was good for a half a week over the team that was good for 3 months.
I will tell you this: you should see how much, Jared, you should see the Twitter battles I've had over that. Wasted years of my life over how silly that is. Especially the ACC fans, they are. It's like biblical. It's like it's written into the side of Mount Sinai or something. That's the only champion the ACC has.
Yeah, it's dumb. So let me get your thoughts on a couple of the biggest storylines that have happened over the last few days. Do you endorse the decision that they made not to release the bracket?
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand why people wanted to see it. Hofstra wanted to see their name on the bracket. Okay, but Hofstra would have been on the bracket, or Robert Morris. I mean, everybody, you couldn't take that away from them. They won their leagues. Hofstra won the Colonial. Robert Morris won the Northeast. Utah State won the Mountain West. Belmont won the Ohio Valley. That's done. They were in the tournament. That was not going to change. Nothing that could have happened could have changed the fact that they had earned their way into the tournament. But a lot of leagues still hadn't decided. Still hadn't, like, if they were to go for, if they had not canceled, then they would have needed to produce a bracket, and they would have had to have a truncated season. It would have been the way it went. And so you'd have to give the automatic bid probably to the regular season champion. The American Conference designated Cincinnati as their automatic bid before they knew the before they knew the NCAA's was going to go away. They designated them as their automatic bid in case the tournament did continue or was postponed rather than canceled. So you would have had to do that if you intended to perhaps resume it. But you said cancel. I don't see any reason why you give a raw deal, say, to the team that didn't get the chance to do what Boston U did, which was knock off the number 1 seed in the Patriot League. Xavier got eliminated from my bracket and a lot of others by losing on Wednesday night to DePaul. And they didn't deserve to be in at that point. But a lot of people that were in the same general category still hadn't played. I'm trying to think of now, like Richmond hadn't played yet. Like if Richmond went out and lost the next night, well, Richmond didn't have a road Seton Hall win, and they didn't beat Cincinnati, and they didn't beat a handful of other tournament teams. Their resume was largely based on, well, they didn't lose to anybody. They didn't lose they didn't lose very many games. But I don't think I would have had them ahead of Xavier if they had lost their first game. So I don't think it was fair to those teams that lost their way out just on a basis of an accident of timing when their tournament began as opposed to when someone else's did. So I think that the only way to do it right was to do what the NCAA did. If they were going to play a tournament, okay, you had to make accommodations. You're not going to play the tournament. There's no reason to put a bracket up there that wasn't just.
Yeah. As we look forward with this offseason, I mean, obviously, we don't really know what to expect over the next few weeks. AAU tournaments in April have been canceled. It's going to mess up the calendar a little bit. One thing in particular I'm curious to get your thoughts on, there was a lot of talk about the transfer rule changing and the 1 year, that you had to go and sit out, that was going to go away. Do you think that's still going to happen before next season, or is all that stuff going to get tabled now?
I never knew if it was going to happen before next season. And it does seem like this would delay that some. They've got a lot of bigger fish to fry now. And they have to figure out when they can resume, I guess more than anything, when football can resume activity. Will they be able to get on the field in July and August? I sure hope so. I don't want this to continue that long. But what if they can't? So they've got to figure that out. They also have to do some work to justify their salaries or whatever. It's like whether they, if they're working from home like I am, or working in an office, well, however they handle it. I mean, they still got to do work. So maybe this still has a moment to get through. I do wonder if they're going to ponder further the suggestion of people like Mike Krzyzewski. Dick Vitale has advocated this as well. Fran Fraschilla, considering a additional year of eligibility for seniors who in winter sports, men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, ice hockey. They all lost their postseasons as a result.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people push back on that. I don't think, my feeling is, we've had these awful disruptions that are no fun for anybody, literally nobody. And so why not a disruption that's fun for somebody, and I don't know whether anybody take up on the NCAA on that offer. I don't know. And I don't know whether it would lead to some difficult decisions by coaches. I don't think it would, because I think it would include a roster expansion, temporary roster expansion to accommodate any seniors that were coming in. So any seniors that were remaining in case the freshman class pushed them over. You couldn't go beyond, like if you got two seniors and they both stay, doesn't mean you can all of a sudden sign 16 guys or have 16 guys on your roster. Because you said we can have, no, if you had, if you were going to recruit X number of players, and these guys, and this would push you over, you can have them. I'd be fine with that. I just don't see any downside to it. I really don't. I think they're going to have to consider that even if they don't do it. My bet is that they don't, because the NCAA in its track record and the membership's track record has always been to not sweat that some people are being inconvenienced. You don't want to inconvenience the entire apparatus. I don't agree with that approach, but that's what I would expect. But I do think they have to consider it. So then whether or not, and now the one thing I want to say about that, I would not do that for anybody that wanted to leave their team. Like, if you want to play another year at Indiana, you play another year at Indiana. You don't go to Indiana State or Wichita or where. You're not going. Like, if you want the extra year, you're staying where you are. This is where you got the tough deal. This isn't free gravy for you. This is, you got a tough deal at this place that you love and you want to try and take another shot at it. I'd be fine with that. But there no circumstance would I say that you can have the extra year because you graduated this June and now you want to be a grad transfer. No, you had your 4 years of eligibility then. That's you've had enough. That's the only way I'd do that.
I mean, Mike, Wichita might need that just to field a team next year.
I guess Wichita came to mind for reasons, but
they've had 6 guys transfer. Like, based on the latest recommendations, those 6 guys couldn't even hang out in the same room. They've got so many guys transfer. I mean, that's crazy. By the way, Devontae Green, Deron Davis already addressed that. Basically, Deron said they had talked about it, and that's not something that they would take the NCAA up on because they want to see what's next. So it's not like, even though they were obviously devastated to not make the tournament,
right?
They're clearly not pining to get that extra year, but I'm sure some other guys would be. So it would definitely be interesting to see how that would play out. Obviously right now, coaches and teams expected to be either playing in the NCAA tournament or, taking a few weeks off. And then there's obviously recruiting stuff in April. At what point, if this continues to go on and things keep getting delayed, like at what point in the calendar would continued delays and things not happening really start to affect college basketball season for next year, do you think?
Well, really, I mean, I don't think until, schools return to fall. I mean, if the summer gets disrupted, it just affects recruiting a little bit. Guys have to recruit by film more.
Yeah.
You heard over the years a lot of times, oh, we're just babysitting or whatever. And so you might have some guys that wouldn't get discovered. The old Mike Dahm story about how South Dakota State found him. You might have some guys that get missed and all that. But in terms of affecting college basketball, I don't think losing July, if it's necessary, and I hope that's, not the case.
Yeah.
But if you lose July, it just makes it harder to recruit. It doesn't make it impossible to field a team. It just means you have to go. There's a zillion different services now that you can go on and scout guys, and they can send you video links and all that sort of stuff. And my friends in the scouting business will be fielding 1 million calls a day. I'm sure their lives will be quite entertaining, but it doesn't disrupt the actual business of being a college basketball team until you're supposed to start preseason practice, really, because you can run on your own. And if you don't run, you're going to show up and you're going to get beaten out. I mean, they tell you, okay, here's what we want you to do. If you don't have, you don't have to be supervised. We want you to run. And we want you to, spend an hour lifting. This is the exercise you got to do. We want you to spend, we want you to run 5 miles a day, whatever it is. And if you don't do those things, you're going to get beaten out. So there's nobody standing there yelling at you, maybe. Or maybe you got to hire a buddy grab a buddy and say, okay, you yell at me for 4 hours like my strength coach would. But if you have to do those things to make your team. But what affects the actual development of the team is whether or not you can get on the court in September. You'll be, as long as no one else, if everybody can't be on the court in the summer, then nobody can be on the court in the summer. It can't just be, well, there's been absolutely 0 cases in, I don't know, let's just pick a state, Louisiana. So LSU is going back to school so their guys can practice, supervised by Will Wade, but, the problems in Seattle are, there. So Washington can't practice twice a week with Mike Hopkins. Now that's not going to work. They're going to have to address that if indeed there is not a geographic unanimity to the way this is handled.
That might have actually been the best state to pick, given Ed Orgeron's public service announcement, which was fantastic. So maybe LSU, maybe Louisiana actually would be the state that doesn't have that many. And look, we both understand there's like 10,000 concerns more important than how this will affect the college basketball calendar, but that's what we talk about on this show. So
right.
Seems worth addressing. The other big story, riding in on his white horse to give us content to talk about, Rick Pitino is back in college basketball, which I don't know. For some reason, the timing of this is just perfect and inappropriate all at the same time. What are your thoughts on Pitino being back at Iona for anybody who didn't see that news?
After he was fired by Louisville, actually now technically a resignation, according to the settlement that was reached in court over his suit against them that was filed subsequent to when they removed him. I was asked him a lot of times whether I thought that he would coach again in college. And my answer was always, if he's coaching in college, he's riding the bus. Because I didn't think there would be anybody at the high major level that would hire him.
Yeah.
And they don't get on many planes in the MAC. The 2A MAC, the MAC. We always MAC.
Say it a little longer. Stretch it out.
Yes. There's no, the longest trip he's got in that league is to Canisius in Buffalo. Every other trip is really about 2 hours or under, and a lot of under. I mean, some of them are half an hour or less. And so, that's what the nature of what he's taken on here is. And it does give him the advantage of living close to some family. And he has an apartment in New York that he's had probably since he was still with the Knicks. He's got an apartment in New York, so he can live there. And so it has some geographic advantages. He even mentioned on a radio interview today that it was close to his country club. He belongs to Winged Foot. I think I would have left that out. But I knew that that's what would have to happen. And as far as him as as this outlaw figure that a lot of people want to paint him, I've never really looked at him that way. I looked at him as a by the end of final 7 years or 6 years or maybe 5 at Louisville, I thought he was a terrible manager. I just don't think I think he was an absent boss. I know he spent a lot of time away from campus. I think a lot of people took advantage of that. And I don't think that he paid close enough attention to who he was hiring or what the people he hired did. And I thought a lot of it got away from him. And I think that was the number one problem that he had. And I can't promise he's going to show up, and do the old style Pitino 12-hour, 14-hour days that he did back when he was at Kentucky. I can't promise anything. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know who he's going to hire. I don't know whether I know those people will be told to follow the rules. I have a lot of friends who coached under him, and they tell you that he was very circumspect about those things in those days. He said on the FAN interview today that you can ask anybody from Boston U Providence, Kentucky or Louisville how he ran his program, and they'll tell you that he was a stickler for the rules. But at the same time, he did say today that he did finally take responsibility for what happened at Louisville. He said, "I should have been fired." That's the first time I've ever heard him acknowledge that.
Wow.
I think he was very angry that he was fired at the time. I think he was very taken aback that he was fired at the time. He sued them for $40 million. He did not get any money out of it, but he did get that technicality changed in regards to his departure. And he finally acknowledged that, he did say that he should have done a better job of who he hired and how they were carrying out their duties and all that. But he finally took responsibility for what happened. Not that he's saying, now at the same time, he will still say, I did not do anything. And I there are parts of it that I'm 100% convinced he didn't know anything about the stuff in the dorms with the strippers. I'm 100% convinced and always have been that he never knew anything about that. Because at its base truth, like that's the dumbest recruiting thing in history. He's a smart man. He would not have signed off on anything that dumb. Like people who followed this for a long time understand the number one rule in recruiting, if you are going to work outside the rules, is number one rule, and it's the only rule since you're breaking all the others, is keep the circle small. Well, that circle couldn't have been, it couldn't have included more people. So he would never have signed off on that. The stuff that happened subsequently, at least according to the federal government, the stuff that allegedly happened, I guess I should say, I'm a little bit less convinced, but I'm not unconvinced. Somewhere in the middle on whether all that, whether he had knowledge of all that. He insists he did not, and I don't have any evidence to say that I believe that he did. But I think that when you bring somebody back into this, like Pitino, you're going to get a lot of, snide jokes and things like that. They bore me, to be honest with you. I'm not, the jokes about, NCAA calling in 3 weeks or whatever, the jokes bore me. I'm not interested, but there is still the possibility that the NCAA will have some penalty. He says no. He also said in the FAN interview that he does not expect to be punished by the NCAA, but we can't know that. We don't even have a notice of allegations at Louisville to know what they might or will be charged with.
Well, we do not condone Rick Pitino jokes on this show, so we will not be telling any of those right now. A couple of Big Ten questions for you. As we kind of look ahead a little bit, what are some of the biggest, because, we're still seeing, players deciding to transfer, and eventually, we're going to start talking NBA draft, and our guys going to come or go, and who knows, how those events are going to affect things. Are guys going to be able to do pre-draft workouts? I mean, there's so much up in the air. But what do you view as the biggest stay or go decisions among Big Ten players? Like Luka Garza, for example, is an interesting stay or go decisions. Which ones off the top of your head are really going to kind of dictate the landscape of the Big Ten next year?
Well, I think there are a handful of players that we expect to go after this year that had been, I'm not pushing anybody out, but I think that it's been pretty well established that Ayo Dosunmu would be likely to enter the draft. Garza would be an obvious one about whether he, because Luka's draft stock isn't going to change much. He's in the best possible shape he can be. He's had the best possible season he can have, short of team performance and them advancing farther. So at the same time, his stock is not going to get any better, but it's not that high. And so he may just decide, that we can be special, we can really be extraordinary next year. And I'd like to be a part of that. And, the NBA is not exactly calling out for me. So I might as well just do this for another year and have a good time and try to chase a championship.
I mean, he could become a legend with the kind of numbers he might put up.
Absolutely. So there's a lot there for him. I think Kofi Cockburn is one that people will talk about. I don't see why he would go. He's not ready to play in the league. And if he had the same level of accomplishment at a different position with a different skill set, one might say that it would be something to consider. But he's playing at a position now that they're not valuing much, and his particular skill set is not that valuable to them. So that he might be someone that they would want to see add some more to his game. And he can spend the next 5 months trying to figure out if he can develop a terrific jump shot, and then his athleticism, and and he can work on his footwork, covering pick and roll and all that, and maybe he could make himself into a first round pick. But it's not. I don't think that would happen now, so I don't see the upside to that. I think Jalen Smith is another that I think you'd put in the Dosunmu category. He had a fantastic year, and I think most people expect him to depart and be selected at a fairly reasonable time. I would. what I've seen, the projections are not what I would put him at. I would put him much higher than a lot of people have. I don't understand the reticence with him, and maybe the reticence keeps him in. I don't know. The one thing that's interesting about this is I don't think that there will be any real testing. Like, you can put your name in and see whether anybody calls you, but you can get the same phone calls whether you put your name in or not, because there's not going to be, more than likely, any real pre-draft enterprise. I don't think there'll be camp. I don't think there'll be individual workouts. We won't know for sure for a while. And I suppose it wouldn't hurt to put your name in case everything breaks and you can do those things, and then you can always pull out later. But I'm not sure that this is going to be a typical pre-draft process.
Well, Mike, you are known for your encyclopedic knowledge of sports and especially the Big Ten. So I'm gonna put you on the spot and test you a little bit. So I found this website called NCAA Game Sim, because we're jonesing for basketball. We got to find stuff to do, and so their team database goes all the way back to 2009, 2010. And so I had this idea to take the 68 best Big Ten teams of that era, put them in a bracket, seed them by efficiency margin, and let's just see what happens. So I did the research today. I haven't done any of this yet. I'm not promising it. This is one of those ideas that fizzle and, I don't have time to do, but it did sound fun. And so I did go through and compile the data, which was pretty interesting. So I want to ask you a few questions to see if you can get these. So it's since the 2009-2010 season. Okay, so it covers 10 seasons.
Right.
Which team or which school has the most teams in the bracket, basically of the top 68? Which one has the most? Because there is one school on top.
I think Wisconsin.
It's Wisconsin. All 10 Wisconsin teams made it. All of them.
Even the one that finished under 500?
At the 2016 team, they're going to be in a play-in game. But I think the 2016 team, their efficiency margin was like 16.55, I believe, unless I wrote it down wrong.
The 2016 team, the 2016 team, yeah.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, how about this? Of the 2020 season that just completed, 11 teams, no, I think 12 teams made it, because Minnesota made it and Indiana made it. So Purdue made it. Yeah, they all made it. So, I mean, there are a couple.
The Big Ten was overrated, Jared, clearly.
Yeah, very overrated. Okay, now here's a question for you. Oh, by the way, so it was Wisconsin with 10, Michigan State with 9, Michigan, Ohio State, and Purdue all had 8, Iowa with 6, and then Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota with 4 that made it. Who are the 4 number 1 seeds?
Ooh, okay. All right. I'm going to say for sure 2015 Wisconsin, and if that's not one of them, I'm stopping.
They are number 1. They are the top overall seed.
All right. Okay. Yep. All right, now I feel good.
But there is one other team that's very close to them, actually.
Okay.
Very close. And they were by far the 2 top teams.
Okay. I'm going to say, now, does this efficiency margin take you all the way through the tournament too?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not Selection Sunday. Okay. All right.
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to say 2016 Michigan State.
They are a number 2 seed.
They are 2 seed. Oh,
yep. 7th overall.
All right. Let's think here. 2013 Indiana.
They are the top number 2 seed.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that surprised me a little bit. I would have.
There is a very recent one. A very recent one.
2019 Michigan State.
Yes, they are one of the other number 1 seeds. They are not the other one that is really close to Wisconsin, though. You got to go back a ways for the other 2 number 1 seeds.
All right, I'm going to say 2011 Ohio State.
Yep, they're the other one right below Wisconsin, the second number 1 seed.
There you go. And the last one, I will say. So did you say the 9-10 season? Yeah, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to say 2012 Ohio State made it too.
That is pretty darn good. That is pretty darn good, because even your misses were the 2 seeds. To do that off the top of your head with no preparation, that was impressive. Because I was going back looking at that, I was like, wow, I forgot how good those teams were back then.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean
so
the famous story, I've written it many times about when people talk about how, like, if you have somebody on the committee that it's an advantage. I always point out that in 2011, Ohio State was the #1 overall seed in the tournament, got sent to New Jersey to play, and had North Carolina was its #2. They won the ACC tournament, I believe, or the ACC regular season, one of those two. And then Kentucky was the 4 seed. They won the SEC tournament. And the chairman of the selection committee that year was none other than Gene Smith, Ohio State athletic director. one of the really interesting decisions that the committee has made.
yes.
Of
So
course, UK knocked them out.
So last question for you, Mike. What on earth are you going to do moving forward? What are you going to write about? Like, what's your plan?
Well, I first of all, we have a huge piece that I did in advance of the start of the tournament that we were really excited about, because we were going to take you back, and we're still really excited about the story, but you don't have the spirit of the tournament. The NCAA tournament as we know it was basically invented in 1985. That was that 35-year. This is the 35-year anniversary of the expansion of the tournament to 64 teams, and that really basically launched the tournament to what it is today. And so I went back and I looked through some of the people who participated that I know now and still could, they're still basically involved in the game. And I spoke to 6 or 7 of them and just sort of got their memories of what that tournament was like and what their thoughts are on how that impacted the growth of college basketball in the tournament. And so that'll appear, I believe, on Thursday.
Oh,
and
cool.
that's now people have time to read it, because
Yeah.
they'd be like, oh, that's a cool idea. And then they'd never get back to it because there were going to be like 100 games on. Now, no games. So you have all the time in the world to read the entire piece. One of the things that I want to do is I want to do a project on games that I missed. Now, I have covered every tournament since 1988. But what people don't always realize is that when you cover the tournament, you miss some of it. You miss some of the tournament. And so because you're at a site, say, and like you're at the first round site and there are lots of games going on and you're trying to keep track, and you maybe see last play or last couple of plays, but you're not seeing the game. And so I'm going to go back and try to do as many, watch the game on YouTube and watch them, and then sort of like talk about, why they were important games and why, and what was cool and what happened and why things went the way they did.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. And so I'll do that. And I've got some interesting stories to tell in some of those instances about why I wasn't there. And including a really funny story about the 1989 Final Four, which was the last one I didn't attend. And it's a funny story that I'll tell when I get to the Final Four. So there's some really interesting stories about why I missed particular games and what the impact of those games was. I mean, I lived in Pittsburgh and covered Pitt from 1989 to 1992. And probably the most famous game in Pitt basketball history, or one of the 3 or 4 most famous games, or certainly one of the 3 or 4 most famous defeats, was a game that they played against Vanderbilt in the second round of the '88 tournament. And they were up 3 in the final seconds, and allegedly they were told to foul but didn't. And a guy named Barry Goheen hit a 3-pointer from the corner for Vandy, put the game into overtime. And they won the game, even though Will Perdue, who was their big star, had fouled out. And that, Barry Goheen, you walk around Pittsburgh and say the words Barry Goheen, there's still people that punch in the nose. And so I think there have been stories written about how he knows he's like persona non grata in the city of Pittsburgh for that shot. Yeah. So that's a game I missed in its entirety because I was in Hartford covering Temple or somebody like that in the second round. I wasn't covering Duquesne then, so so they clearly were not involved. So I went to a different site and covered that. So there are lots of stories like that I'll tell, and then we'll get to our preseason top 25. Although I'm a little bit skeptical of jumping too soon in that. I'd like to get some resolution on whether or not they might allow seniors to return.
Yeah.
Because that really, you can sort of project who might leave, but you can't project whether they're going to do that and therefore who might stay. So, but that's something we'll do as well. And mostly what I'll do, Jared, is miss basketball. I mean,
yeah,
it's this time of year is so special. And, I work every day, and I'm not complaining, and I'm just explaining. I work every day from basically after Christmas until April 5th or 6th or whatever. And of course, this year it stopped on March 9th or 10th, 12th, whatever it was. But I work every single day during that period of time. And what keeps you going is the adrenaline from being a part of that.
Yeah.
It is absolutely magical. I mean, I will never, ever, I will never complain about doing it. And I will never, ever, I'll never not appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I got really emotional after I finished my story about the cancellation of the tournament on Thursday. When you're writing and working, you're focused and you're doing your job. And when I got done, I got really emotional because, I mean, who knows how many more of these I get to cover, and it's not just about me. I talked to Mick Cronin from UCLA that day, and he said, look, I'm going to coach it again. You're going to cover it again. But these guys, this was it. The seniors, they may never get to play in it again, or in some cases never get to play in it.
Yeah.
This was their shot. And I feel for every one of them. And when I watch the videos that are coming up now that are really cool, each school doing its own one shining moment.
Yeah.
They're really cool. And I feel so badly for those guys. I really do. And I apologize for getting emotional about something like this, because I know there's more important stuff. But this stuff means a lot to a lot of people, and it's been a big part of my life for pretty much my entire life. And I know there's more important stuff. I am the last writer ever to ever think that this stuff is important. When I was in Pittsburgh working at the Pittsburgh Press, I used to get angry if we put sports on A1, because I understand sports' place in life. I understand it's entertainment, but it means something. The participation of it and the appreciation of it means something to the people who do, and I feel bad for everybody that's missing out on that this year.
Mike, we appreciate your candor. This is a safe space for emotions about basketball. That is for sure, because we have certainly had ours too. The great irony to me of the tournament getting canceled this year with everything that is going on, and obviously we understand why it had to be canceled and all of that, but at a time when so many people are going to feel isolated but also have time to watch, nothing would have brought people together and made them feel connected, at least, in our corner of the world, than having the NCAA tournament to connect on. And it's been, interesting and heartening to see all the different ways that people are still trying to do it anyway. Whether it's with the One Shining Moment videos or making up ridiculous brackets or whatever, just trying to find that way to hey, let's try to scratch this itch somehow, but do it together. And that's why when March and basketball are at their best, and they actually mean something more than the games, but to your point, for all the guys who aren't going to get a chance to play, it is heartbreaking, because the players only get so many opportunities to do this. We'll be able to keep watching it, but who knows what they would have been able to do at that chance, and they didn't get it, and that's disappointing for them.
I feel bad for all the Hoosiers who would have been in. I'm convinced that they would have been in, just no doubt about it, and they had earned that, and it was not the exact season they imagined, but it was a better season than many appreciate it to be. The one thing about those One Shining Moment videos is it drives home that as wonderful as March is, and there's nothing quite as wonderful as it is, November, December, January, February are really cool too. And, those of us who appreciate that understand it, but maybe this will help reach more people and make them understand that if you want to get on board a little earlier, you're welcome.
Absolutely. Well, that is a good note to end on, Mike. Really appreciate your time, and I guess we'll just play it by ear. If we want to keep doing this, there'll always be things to talk about, and we got time. So.
Yes, I can't turn you down based on time. I got plenty of time. So you want to do it, I'm up for it.
Okay, well let's we'll play it by ear and we'll just connect over the weeks and see if it makes sense to do it. But whether we do it or not, we really appreciate your insight. The time that you've spent with us this week. I know I get so many comments throughout the week about how much people like these segments and look forward to them. So we really appreciate the time and just all the insight that you bring because it really adds a lot to what we do.
I enjoy connecting with you. You're wonderful, and I love basketball fans of all colors, whether it's black and gold or crimson and cream or whatever color it is, I love connecting with them and my Twitter is always open for anybody that wants to talk.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Mike. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jared.
Mm-hmm. All right. The great Mike DeCourcy on with us talking basketball. Man. It's still so weird not having basketball this March, but good to talk with Mike and get his perspective about everything. So yeah, moving forward, we'll have Assembly Call Radio on Thursday. We're going to start doing some rewatches of IU games. We're kind of figuring out the calendar. We'll probably do a game. We'll probably do one Friday night and Sunday night, and then the next week, Friday and Sunday, we're going to kind of make it like the NCAA tournament schedule. But we're kind of finalizing those games. We'll probably do a first-round game, a round of 32 game, a Sweet 16 game, and it may not be the obvious ones that you think we would pick, but we're going to try and do some unique ones that maybe haven't been talked about a ton. We're finalizing some of that, so I'll make an announcement once we have that ready to go. Basically, we'll do live rewatches of games, so it's like we'll hit play on the game all at the same time. We can tweet about it, and then we'll hop on for a post-game show when it's over. So that should be fun. Like I said, Assembly Call Radio Thursday night. We're going to take that bracket and break it down and talk about it. We're just going to find ways to try to, creative ways to have fun talking about basketball because, that's what we all know how to do this month. And it's very weird to not be able to do it. And we've got time. So whatever we can do to just give each other something to connect over and have fun talking about. So if you have ideas, by the way, let me know. Shoot me an email, jared@assemblycall.com. Send us a tweet @assemblycall if there's eventually we'll get into our normal off-season content, but I'm not, I don't want to start doing player breakdowns and doing all that stuff now, so we'll try and find some other fun stuff that we can do. So let me know if you have ideas. And again, support homefieldapparel.com, support your local food banks, support Buffalo's, by the way. Buffalo's really stepping it up. I don't know if you saw that, but they are basically doing a service where kids of MCCSC, Monroe County Community Schools, who, obviously they're not in session. If they need food, Buffalo's is actually going to deliver it to them. It's really, in times like these, you learn a lot about people and businesses and what they do. Do they try to, really squeeze it, or are they, and every business has a different situation. So you don't necessarily want to judge without knowing the context. But man, when you see businesses go above and beyond for their employees, for the community, it makes you feel good. It makes you want to support them. And that's just, that's the time. We're all in this together. Let's get through it together. And eventually there'll be basketball on the other side of it. So appreciate you guys being here today. Appreciate you listening to us all season long. We will talk to you Thursday night on Assembly Call Radio. See you then.